methodologies. He primarily focuses on the mediation of socially constructed images, on identity formation as it relates to Black masculinity and celebrity. He received an MFA from Indiana University in printmaking and an MFA from Yale University in sculpture. So, as you can see, we have a formidable group of artists with us today. And I just want to kick off the conversation. We're going to have a very informal conversation because I know you all so well. The first question is, what does, considering that the focus of this year's fair is Black existentialism, what does Black existentialism mean to each of you? Noah's gonna go first.
Oh, I'm going first. I'm sorry, child. I thought you were saying that I am Black existentialist. Like if you look in the dictionary, there I am with a picture like. No, Black existentialism to me is the everyday existence of Black peoples. Mm-hmm. Now, existentialism doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be a kind of Sartrean, the end of the world pessimism. It could be just it could be spiritual, right? When I used to go to church, I grew up in a church because my grandfather was a bishop. There was an existential part in that because it took me somewhere and it allowed me to reflect back on my life through that medium, right? And what I'm trying to do in my work, because I'm particularly use French weaving as a method of communication. For me, Black existentialism exists in the very fibers of the work, which is all cotton. You dig?
Right.
And it's a particular part of the Black experience that is also associated with labor, love, joy, pain, sunshine, and rain. You dig?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
See, I love you're poetic. He is a poet, everybody.
I try.
Because I guess the idea around Black, I did a lot of reading this year because I had time, right? Like we were sequestered, we were behind closed doors, and we had a lot of time to think about a number of things. Last year was a tumultuous year on many fronts. And so like some of the thinkers, that I had an opportunity to just kind of delve a little deeper into were like folks like Bell Hooks and, Chimamanda, who's like always like such an amazing force. And then you have folks like James Baldwin. When you're creating work, do you think about conceptually, do you refer to anybody that is important to you as like, because I know you said philosophical methodologies are a part of your work. Do you have folks that inspire your work?
Yeah, but my understanding of philosophy is broad. Richard Pryor is one of the greatest philosophers of all time. He takes me somewhere in the studio, and then sometimes when I'm in the studio and the work's not doing what I needed to do, I'll put on a little Nina.
Okay.
And Nina will assuage me into a different direction, a direction that I didn't know was necessary, but it ends up being. So these are the kind of things that move me to make the work while making the work that I make. You dig? Please.
What about you, Amber?
So if we're doing definitions, I absolutely think that Black existentialism is, it's literally our cellular energy, and it manifests for all of us in various ways. Meaning, he mentioned Richard Pryor and how that came out is kind of drawing out or taxing people's minds about what their everyday life was, humor. That was his medicine. That was his way of having that dialogue. And of course, others, it's art or it's science. But I think it can also go down to dance or any other modality that helps you manage thyself and manage thy life. And I'm sure that so many other people, actually encountered that and recrafted that, through the last 2 years, if not still doing that. And it's essential. And just ongoing, And for Nina, you mentioned Nina, and I literally is one of the artists that I grew up on, and she actually had me she can put you in a trance.
Ain't that the truth?
Yep.
She can.
Absolutely.
And in addition to that, like if you have music and you have another modality that allows you to have that conversation with self and then with others, it's intrinsic. It's captivating. It's healing. It's ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's tough because to be able to do that kind of deep leg work, you have to have trust. Right? You have to have trust that whatever you fall into, it's going to do something that, whether you knew you needed it or not,
Yes.
it's going to do it to you. You right?
That is absolutely true.
And I get there by way of thinking about, how would I say, the ways in which, from my personal experience, black men do not seek the kind of mental health care that I think we deserve. You understand me?
Yeah.
Right? And doing that legwork myself, recognizing that, oh, in order for me to get better, I got to let go of some things. And letting go and being available to the world is a whole issue of trust that, quite frankly, a lot of us have a hard time dealing with because we don't even see it as that. You see?
That's because we haven't been raised.
Ain't that
as
the truth?
And that's also because that a good portion, and it's not just black men, it's people, it's also people of color, and that's because a good portion of us are still in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, when you're in survival mode, you don't think about your health or your mental well-being in that way. It's because what we don't realize, it's not well, maybe we don't. A lot of us is that is a privilege. Health is a privilege. And that's why it's held over us to such extent.
That's fair.
And mental health is beyond privilege. You know, and if you think about the fact that our nation and the way that this world is structured in such white domination, and against its anti-blackness, our health, our wellness is used as a weapon against us.
Yeah, it's what's his name? A friend of mine. Ashton was telling me that that black vulnerability, and this is a part of the existential question, that black vulnerability is a weapon used against us.
Absolutely.
Ain't that the truth?
Absolutely.
But I feel like we're talking too much. Should we check?
know.
You know,
So I wanted to
Stephen.
actually also ask Stephen and Bisa the same question.
Yeah.
What black existentialism means to them. I'm wondering, is Bisa and Stephen, were they able to come in yet?
Are you able to see? So I cannot see anything. Am I on a video or am I just talking?
It sounds like we can hear you, but we can't see you just yet, Stephen.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? It's this COVID and all of these technical things.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, no worries. Your voice is just as wonderful as your face, I'm sure. The question was, what does black existentialism mean to you?
I mean, I sort of never really thought about it because I always sort of spend my time just existing. For a while, I think when I was young, I sort of felt like I'm trying to speak existentially now, but I was just there. Like I didn't feel like I was participating in life as much. And now being older, doing research, looking at history, looking at the history of Black people here in America, I feel like now I'm sort of finding a footing sort of in my 40s and setting a place for myself. But before, I felt like, sort of invisible. And now I'm in the process of trying to make myself visible through my art, through my paintings, through my quotes.
And you definitely make an impact through your work. That's absolutely sure. And your work explores some very deep themes about Black existence. Our history with slavery, our history with a number of isms that still affect us to this day. And I guess this is a question that can also bleed into the conversation with everybody. How does the actual materiality of textiles, why the textile choice as a medium, to explore these ideas? What is the, I guess, the underlying importance of textiles to the conversations that you have through your work?
Yeah, for me, it just kind of came up out of nowhere. I was working on this piece called Birth of a Nation. And I sketched it out, and I was trying through painting and drawing to see if I can get the image that I was making to fit and to make an impact. And in that image, it has a flag in it, and I was going around to different stores trying to find a flag, trying to find a Betsy Star flag, and I just couldn't. And that's when I realized that I had to sew it. And my mother was sewed our clothes when we were young. She was a quilter. And so I felt like I had to tap into that to figure out how to make this work. And that's sort of how it came to me. And it's a process of learning, because I had forgotten a lot of things since I was a child. So I would just go through different books, look at YouTube videos, and I find that crafters are very kind with their knowledge of materials. And so by looking at YouTube videos, I was able to learn the craft of quilting. And ever since then, it's been a part of my work. But it's challenging. Like, painting was easier for me, but quilting is always more challenging and more taxing, sort of like physically and mentally.
And in the process of creating your quilts, do you still use painting as a maybe exploratory way of getting to your quilt making?
Through my drawing, the thing with I don't paint on my quilts, or I don't make marks with my quilts, but I always go back to what I learned in school and what I learned in painting and drawing, how to use form, how to use shapes to sort of convey a message. And when I'm quilting, I'm always constrained by what the fabric does and what the designer of the fabric and the pattern does. And so it's a constant sort of talk and play with the object, because I don't necessarily get to control what the object is or what it does. And so it's in a way that's challenging, but in a way it uses my mind. There's a constant communication with my work, especially my quilting. And I finally, because I've been quilting about 6 years or so, like, I developed processes, and so it's easier for me to sort of show those processes to other people. So when I'm quilting, it's more communicative, because I usually have like 1 or 2 people helping me when I'm making these quilts. And so I'm able to share stories with them. We're able to talk. We're able to do stuff. I watch like all of Insecure, working on these last few quilts I've been working on. So it's just been a process, learning these materials.
Amazing, wonderful. And I don't want to forget Bisa. I still want to ask her if she's available. What Black existentialism means to her. Bisa, are you there? Is she there? No.
I guess not.
No?
Yeah,
I guess not. Well, then, okay. Well, then I guess I will defer the same question to you, Amber, with regards to materiality. Like, how does the ideas exist and live through the materials that you select for your work?
So specifically textile? Okay. My interest in textile came early, even to the point where I at one point, I used to design dresses and clothing on drawing. And I would even tear up. I love to get Vogue and Essence magazines that focused on fashion. And I would literally tear them up, and I had binders that organized them by...
What age is this?
I swear, like 11, 12. I would organize them by designer, y'all. It's crazy. So I was always interested in started in fashion, but also in relationship to what I had access to at home in my home life, in relationship to some of the El Salvadorian or Ecuadorian fiber. They're not quilts, but they're small works that have scenes in them, and they're usually stacked, and they're fiber, and that and like Barbara Cole quilts, G's Bend quilters. So I had exposure to fiber arts very early, including dolls, handmade dolls.
Yeah.
But I've always had an interest in fact that we don't go anywhere without clothing.
Yeah.
Our relationship is tethered to cloth,
Yeah.
And how it covers and exists on our bodies. And that relationship has always intrigued me, beyond the fact of how you feel when you're in various, things, whether it be dressing up in your mother's or your father's clothing, or, things that you adorn yourself in Halloween, or to feel pretty. Those relationships that we've had with our objects and our materials around us have always fascinated me. I remember putting all of my pink and purple things around me as a girl. And at that point, that was important, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But so that, spiraled into works that were fabric-based for me. Later on, after I left, I say that like I left a relationship. After I left figuration, I went to textile, and it was my home. It was a release. I could think and do and create outside of the boundaries of what is fine art when it comes to framing and exhibiting. And I just have never gone back. Majority of my work, although I do extensive range of works, I usually always include some aspect of fiber.
And do you see yourself, because you said you left figuration, but do you see yourself ever exploring or returning? Maybe it's not that you return to figuration, but then perhaps going outside of your usual media to explore different ideas.
So the way that I look at creating in general, it's about fitting the overall, whether it be commissioned, overall idea, to then what is the medium that I'm trying to work with, and then meshing the two. Because you can't, or you can have the wrong medium to convey an idea, but then you'll have a failed artwork or a failed concept. And of course, you don't want to do that. But I think it's a relationship between what you're trying to convey and how that material is accepted and or misunderstood or used traditionally or not. So that's always like some of the things that are triggering my mind. So I absolutely one day decide to do figuration. It just depends on what the hell I'm trying to say.
Okay. So the ideas will kind of dictate what media you decide to
Absolutely.
use. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
makes perfect sense.
Thank you, girl.
And then what about you, Noel?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll be honest. My engagement with textiles started at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I tell everybody the story. My old friend and dealer who passed away, Jack Tilton, used to tell me years ago, he's like, no, you gotta go to the Met. And I'd be like, what the fuck, Jack? I go to the Met all the time. I go on a Thursday. What are you talking about? He was like, but you gotta go on Fridays. And I would say, why? And this was like 10 years ago before tourists showed up. He said, because all the great artists go. And I would go to the Met on Friday nights looking for people to stare at.
Okay.
I would try to find David Hammonds. I never found him. He would say David was there. I would never found him. Or I would try to find Richard Tuttle. And Richard might be there staring at a rock.
Right.
But I thought to myself, why I got to stare at this white man stare at a rock in the African wing? Why don't I find somewhere else to go where no one is, right?
Yeah.
So I went to the margins. I went to the medieval wing and found tapestry.
Okay.
And I didn't know why I was mesmerized by it. I just sat there and stared at the unicorn forever. And the attendant and I started talking about it, and I realized my interest in this image is that for me, it seems to be the advent of photography. Because I started doing the research, and I was like, oh, yo, this dude, Jacquard, he invents this thing called punch card registration. Really is a card. It has a bunch of holes in it. When you're weaving through a loom, if the thread goes through, it becomes image. If there's no hole, thread can't go through. It's the beginning of binary code. Dig? I read that, man, I'm like, oh. And then 40 years later, Charles Babbage, this English cat, picks up on it and invents what was called the difference engine and the analytical engine. Those are the beginning of the computer. Wow. I said, shit, man. Every time I'm staring at a screen, I'm staring at a textile. So then what I did was I got entrepreneurial with it.
That's powerful.
Right? I said, well, shit, if they can do it, I can do it. So I found weavers to weave for me. And I started taking images from the FBI and the CIA of black oppression and sending them to my weavers, and we would figure out how to weave them. Right? And what really got me, once I started picking up on that logic, I was like, well, shit, the way the method of weaving is tied to structures of power that precede my very existence. I said, oh, shit, well, the tapestry, quite frankly, is a communication of power. Yeah. How can I use that against the system, right? And then it got deeper than that. I had to go to the goddamn cotton fields, man. You see, because all the work I make is woven out of threads of cotton. And what we do in my studio is we tack those things to the wall, and we pick them with nails and awls and really rough up the surface, right? We ain't doing shit but picking cotton, man. You understand?
Right.
So all of that kind of historical baggage that is tied to a particular material that built the construction of this table that is capitalism was interesting to me. And every time people come and see the work, I hope they see some of that in it. Yeah. You know, but I also think, and I think a lot of us, the three of us who are here dealing with textile, are dealing with fiber in terms of care. And for me, caring about objects is important because what it does is it undercuts the stereotypical logic or illogic, because it's sick, that black men don't care. And massaging fabric and moving things and placing it in a particular way, that is care like I've never seen before. And I think the three of us are doing it, you see.
But I think you make such an interesting point, because textiles are, in fact, made from a material that was a part of our very difficult history.
Yeah.
And that each of you have found ways to transform it into systems of communication that kind of reverse the trauma of that, and also tell the story, like tell real stories about who we are and what we've been through prior, but then how our existence is evolving and transforming and being transmuted into something beautiful. I think I wanted to ask Stephen, because you mentioned medieval art, and Stephen's work makes so many references to medieval history. Can you expound upon that a little bit more, Stephen?
Yeah, a lot of that actually has to do with my college professor at the University of South Carolina. He was interested in a lot of medieval work and Renaissance artwork, and that sort of poured on into me. And how I sort of became attached to it is I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and for me, growing up, it was hard. And I felt like there was this overemphasis of, an emphasis of God, and that man is sinful. And so when I would look at this Catholic iconography of these saints, I would see like these people with these halos around them. And so I wanted to incorporate that into my work, because I felt like if you saw a black person with a halo around them, it's sort of hard to tell them they're this bad person. And so I wanted to see the goodness in myself, and I wanted to see and portray the goodness of other people. And so that's why I started incorporating that in my work. And I also just like the idea of using like really sparkly, shimmering things, because as I've grown, my idea of God has evolved. The he, she of God is sort of all around and all encompassing and reflecting off of everything, even our conversation here today. And so that's why I always go back to that in my artwork. Even in my quotes, there's always sort of like some round halo or some sort of spiritual sparkly effect in the works.
I also wanted to ask, as an extension of that question, each of you, because each of you work in textile, how particular are you when you're sourcing materials to create your works? are there particular fabrics that you that you specifically go to, or is it sort of like a hodgepodge of just collecting anything? Are you very specific about which textiles you want to use in your work?
Oh, well, I
For
guess.
me,
Oh, no, go ahead, Stephen. Go ahead.
Yeah.
no, for me, it started with my mother because my mother was a sewer. And so the first thing I did was go back home to South Carolina and collect a lot of fabrics from her. And since then, you sort of learn to where you need to go. There's a shop here called Scrap Be More that I find a lot of fabrics that people have given away. And a lot of things, because this is a very traditional craft, a lot of people that do this are frankly old. And so when people die or when someone's grandma dies or passes, like they know that I'm the quilter. And so a lot of people give me stuff that once a relative has died. And so often, like I say a little prayer to that person because they didn't know that in 1955, when they were buying that piece of fabric, they were buying it for me to put in this specific quilt. So each piece has its own memory, its own energy, and I try to honor that whenever I make each of these pieces.
How about you, Amber?
So I think I started getting gifts like from the universe early on, like when you were young and you were walking with or when I was young, when I was walking with my mother or family, and I would see something sparkly and pick it up, and it started as a collecting thing with objects, but also in relationship to my own, the items that I use myself, and once you're starting overly using things in your environment, I'm always intrigued by what you do with them afterwards, and what's the lives and the memory and things that exist in those objects, whether it be fabric or material, and then how do they exist afterwards, after they've outdone or outlived that one use. So I started collecting things of my own. And then repurposing them into the artworks. So in some sense, it's part of my own recycling process in terms of the earth itself, but also through memories and time. So it's another layer of like time building or time warping. But in general, I don't have a certain fabric that I absolutely either have to or do not use. But I also use them differently than you guys.
Oh, you do?
And so, yeah, I use all types of fabric. And it speaks to my relationship with color, my relationship with, specific relationship with materiality. So.
That's fair.
And do you know?
Yeah, I guess for me it's pretty obvious, for one, right, the cotton relationship, but also the two primary fabrics, maybe the three now, because two of them are on display at Nada. Basketball, leather, was really vinyl,
Yeah.
and athletic towels.
Okay.
So what I do is, because I understand textiles is relationship to text, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in this French philosopher Cézanne, woman who talks about what does it mean for women to write their bodies, to script their own narratives against the patriarchal structure, right? And I was like, well, wait a minute, what does that mean for a black man to write his body? I don't know what that looks like.
Right.
I never thought about that.
Right.
Right? So I literalize that in a very kind of Warholian way, and I take rolls of basketball material and laser cut out
Yes.
language,
Yep.
right? Because the ball, that material itself is immediately associated with black bodies, because we are the ones who primarily play the sport, or at least we used to be.
Right.
And two, when you really get close to it, it looks like a black body. It's bumpy, like goosebumps. There's a kind of pore nature to it. It looks like black skin. What does it mean to cut letters out of that, right? And then in terms of the athletic towels I'm using they're white with like this one blue stripe going across it, and they're stitched together in longer, multiple rows of blue stripes, so they mimic notebook paper. And I can also then take that basketball lettering and then put it on the notebook paper and start spelling out communications that way, right? So that athletic towel is clearly associated with the black body. Plus it's cotton. Plus it's a whole white towel with a thin blue line. And you know, what does the thin blue line do? It doesn't communicate when black bodies are in peril.
Right.
It shuts up. You feel me?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Just like textile. You feel me?
You're right. Noel's the poet of the bunch.
Oh man, I'm just riffing up here, man. I haven't even begun to.
Just having a good time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I don't think we were able to get Visa back, but
Pictures up.
Oh, I'm here.
oh, you're there. There she is.
Yeah.
Hi, Visa.
Hi. I'm sorry that I'm not on camera. I'm not presentable.
Oh.
So.
It's all good. Your voice is lovely. So I guess we can just ask you one of the initial questions we asked earlier. It was essentially, what does Black existentialism mean to you? And are there any folks that you reference in your work that are important to you, your narrative, and your use of textile?
Well, I guess first I would have to rewind a little just to go back about the definition of existentialism and your reference.
Is that a question or?
Yeah, I would just like if you could, I think because I missed that first part, what are you defining existentialism as in reference to us?
Oh, yeah.
That's
So
all. Just a little clarification.
So Noel, I think Noel's definition earlier was pretty spot on. It's essentially about us being who we are in our fullness, and that manifesting however we want that to manifest versus that of external forces defining what we are.
Sure.
So from that definition, how does your work as a textile artist, and how do you think about your work through that lens?
Yeah. The way I think about it, if I think about me being able to work in my purpose and do what I feel like I was brought to do on this planet, when I first started working with textiles, it was something that connected with me deeply that didn't connect with other materials. And I think that some of my other fellow panelists, they may have felt the same way. Like you feel this deep connection to our past and to the present that we're in and into the future, as if my ancestors were working through me. So I hope that's somewhat on the topic.
Absolutely. And we were also talking about why textiles, and I think the last question I asked Stephen, Amber, and Noel was how important is the actual sourcing of fabrics to your practice? Are there specific textiles that you prefer to use as an extension of a specific narrative that you're trying to communicate, or is it just random hodgepodge textiles that you find that you decide to put together?
Sure. Well, I want to say I love dealing with all kinds of textiles, but like a lot of us, we use what's at hand and what is available. When I first started working, I used my mother's fabrics, and she was a dressmaker. So in my work, you'll see a lot of dressmakers' fabrics, lace and silk and velvet, and not just dresses, but men's suits. Like I like using gabardine and wool. So I think because my mother was a dressmaker and my grandmother, I sort of leaned towards those fabrics more. And then on the other side, what was around me, my father's from Ghana, so I was raised around African textiles, but not so much presented as artwork, but in the clothes that they wore, in the wrap for the little baby, in the oven mitt. Their textiles were used constantly, all the time, and pillows and bedspreads. So I use what's around me. And I imagine that if I was somewhere else with another family, then I would use those things as well.
And do you feel connected to, I guess, a larger conversation around art in general? Amber mentioned that she still, that she used to, figuration was her initial foray in the arts, and Stephen's initial foray was painting. Do you see yourself at some point referencing or even using other modalities in art, or is textile the sole medium that you prefer?
I think I really love all sorts of art. I have a degree in fine art, and I did start in painting, but I prefer fabric now. I prefer cloth, but I feel like as an artist, we have to like leave that opening for that creativity to flow. You know, you never know when you're just gonna start getting interested in wood or clay, or like some people hair, like who knows? You know, I think I love all arts, and I was an art teacher for 13 years in the public schools. I taught high school, so I was constantly like doing lessons like, okay, now we're going to study watercolor, or now we're going to do acrylic paint, or now we're doing pen and ink. And I loved all of those explorations.
Yeah.
I just didn't get into it, but I never want to close that door. I feel like we got to leave that like leave it open and see what happens.
Yeah. And I guess because I want to give everybody an opportunity to add. We have an audience. We have a studio audience. I want to give them an opportunity to ask you all questions, as well as anybody on Zoom. I guess to close out the conversation, what are some of the projects that each of you are getting into right as we speak? Anything that you're excited about in the near future?
So I still have a solo exhibition at American University Museum. It's called Successions, Traversing U.S. Colonialism, and it is started as a journey to heal my 5-year-old self through going back and having time, space, and to live and create in Puerto Rico, because that's where I was born. But in that process of kind of researching and finding my connection, my further connection beyond my actual heritage to Puerto Rico, I realized that the treatment of Puerto Ricans, the ill treatment of Puerto Ricans by the U.S. government, was not just about PR. It was also about the U.S. territories and the treatment of people of color in the territories. And so the exhibit itself encompasses 2 different bodies of work: Place of Breath and Birth, which is about my own experience being an Afro-Latina, but also the 6 quilts that make up Successions, Traversing U.S. Colonialism. Each quilt represents one of the territories. You have the Federal District of Columbia, you have Guam, American Samoa, you have Puerto Rico, USVI, and Northern Mariana Islands. So each quilt represents one of the territories. And on the political side, it represents the breakdown. I decided to dissect either their territory's seal or their flag and give either my opinion or criticism of the U.S. treatment of the territory. But on the back, my intention is to represent the cultural and/or more so the spiritual aspect of each territory, because I wanted people to not just see a criticism or opinion, but I wanted, because in some sense that would also be, I feel, what the U.S. has done to the territories in relationship to what their specific need from them, but not looking at them as whole people, whole cultures, whole communities. And we're talking like millions of people, and that U.S. mainlanders don't always understand or accepting that it's not just about y'all. There are literally millions of people that are also U.S. citizens, but they are not treated as such because they are not of the same color, culture, language, and the assumption in relationship, if they had a federal or congressional power in relationship to their vote, that they would be not voting for Republicans, right. To make it frank. Right. So that is still up. Mm-hmm. And I went on a little long about that, so I will not go into my next project.
But that's such an important project. And I mean, I think you're right. I think mainlanders don't really think about, all the territories that you mentioned, yep. What the representation is like by our governing bodies. Mm-hmm. Are we really thinking about what rights they have? Mm-hmm. And many of them are in tenuous environmental danger. How are we considering those things? Culturally, how are those cultures being preserved? So I think it's a poignant project.
And if I can just do one more drop, so and my overall objective with the body of work is to have a conversation about people of the greater majority, because the way that information, whether it be education or media or life information, is projected to us, it is in the sense that people that are of color are not the majority. It's that people that of European and or considered Caucasian are the majority, but statistically that has not been the case for many of years, and or absolutely is not the case. 80% of our world itself is of people of color. And my intention is to contribute to the global conversation, that is to change our perspective of self and how we relate to each other in relationship to these problems, and so that we are having a better and more formative conversation about the treatment of people of color, period.
That's what's up.
Amen.
I'm supposed to follow that? Oh, okay. Cool.
Like you didn't know about all that stuff.
I don't know a damn thing about that. I'm pretty ignorant, you see.
Whatever.
Yeah, so sorry. I have a solo museum show up right now in Savannah, Georgia, a museum called the Telfair Museum of Art, built on a plantation. The name of the show is Heavy as the Crown, and it takes a series of images that are bracketed between King Jr. and Rodney King and weaves them into a contradiction of spiritual chaos. I just sounded like Don King. And the beautiful part about it is there's a old slave quarters on campus, which I had them take some of the paint chip color from, which is a haint blue that they painted. They still have that haint blue that's painted in the slave quarters. And I had them send it to Home Depot. They made the color for me. They painted the whole space in haint blue. So when you go into the space, you see this beautiful haint blue and this terrible woven tapestry of Fred Hampton's body, right? So there's that. Then I also have another show that just opened, and that one runs until January. So if you're in Savannah, holla at your boy. And then I have another show that just opened in Milan, my first Italy show at an institution called Modima. I didn't know anything about it, but it's apparently a historic space. And I'm so proud and honored to be showing there. And the show there is called It's Magic. So It's Magic in Milan, It's Magic. And it takes a series of images of basketball players, photographs and images pulled from footage, keyframes, turns them upside down and has them all woven upside down. So the weavings are just the shadows on the floor, right? And what you really start to see is that the shadows have more solidity than the black forms. So there's a whole lot of that. And then next year, I'm doing a solo show, I think, at my gallery in Luxembourg. Has 3 spaces, so I'm doing 3 shows consecutively with all new work. And then I'm doing a museum show in Louisville, my hometown, at the KMAC, is the Kentucky Museum of Arts and Crafts. So I'm doing a whole slew of new tapestries for that. And then I think I'm doing my first New York show at an institute, a college in New York in September, but I haven't signed that contract yet. I haven't had a New York show in years, and I think it's fun.
Noel Anderson is a busy man.
I appreciate that. And I teach at NYU full time, so I'm trying. I'm hustling.
There you go. And what about you, Stephen? What's next on your agenda?
So I just completed some quilts for Untitled. So if you go to Untitled and go to the Buck Gallery, you can see 2 new quilts that I created there. And right now I'm finishing up work for a solo show at Westmoreland Museum of Art. The show's going to be in late January to April, and it's called Declaration and Resistance, and it's going through a sort of a short history of Black labor in America from like the late 1800s to about 1950 or so. So it's been a labor of love, and I'm really excited for people to see the work because it's going to be about like 30 new works that I've been creating for that, paintings and quilts.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Stephen. And Bisa?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a number of things coming up, but what I'm really excited about, and I feel really relieved about, is I finished a really big commission, the biggest of my career, a quilt that's 13 feet by 10 feet, and it's the Harlem Hellfighters, the 369th Regiment out of New York, which was mainly African Americans and Puerto Ricans in World War I who fought in a segregated unit. And so there's this really great photo that I came across of these 9 guys on board the Stockholm. They're getting ready to get off the ship and march down Fifth Avenue with, for the first time, white and black crowds cheering them. They're the heroes, and it's so beautiful. They're so cocky and beautiful and proud. And so I finally finished the piece, and it'll debut at the Smithsonian this spring. And I'm just looking forward to working in my studio and just coming up with what's next. But I feel this, I just dropped off the quilt last Saturday, so right now I'm just taking a breath.
Well, thank you and thank all the panelists for being able to be here to talk about your work and just the incredible contributions that you all are making to the artistic ecosystem. I want to take this opportunity now to open it up to our guests that are here in person and also on Zoom. If there are any questions via Zoom, I'm happy to relay that to our audience, to our guests that are here. Yes.
There you go.
We have a first.
Hi,
one.
good evening.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for being here. I love conversations around textiles. I don't think that we have enough of them. Amber, I wanted to also mention that I spent 3 years in St. Croix, so I have very many feelings about that island and what it represents for itself. So that's really interesting, and I'm looking forward to that project from you. But my question actually is asking about the experience of the men on the panel who are involved with what is traditionally being considered women's work, not women's invention, but women's work, and what has come up for you both around gender and labor or community. And I know Noel W. Anderson mentioned care, and Stephen mentioned gender-defying nature of God, but I was interested in a little bit more on that.
Stephen, you want to go first, Stephen?
Oh, so for me, I've had lots of experiences. I mean, the thing with quilting is that it's like I said, traditional. It's very popular among older white women. So oftentimes I go into quilt stores and I have to sort of prepare myself to absorb the environment. It's also it can tend to be a space with a lot of Republicans. And so I have to, especially during the whole Trump era, I had to sort of deal with that energy and figure out how I'm going to navigate through that energy when I just need fabric or I just need a pair of scissors or a certain type of thread. So that's always been sort of something that has been in the back of my mind when I go into these spaces and when I give presentations. And I sort of, I check myself and I observe the world around me. And the other thing that I have been doing is like I watch a lot of YouTube. So like for Harriet, there's this woman named Christy. And so I watch a lot of these discussions about Black women and dark-skinned Black women and how dark-skinned Black women are portrayed in art and entertainment. And I sort of take what they have and what they say, and sort of check myself whenever I'm making the work. Because if you go to the book space at Untitled, I have a piece there called Dressing Up. And it's these tailors dressing up this Black woman. It's just a beautiful image of a Black woman being loved and taken care of by Black men. And one of the things that I've heard a lot of criticism from, especially last year, is just the idea of using dark-skinned Black women as freedom fighters, and that we need to, as artists, as makers, we need to make sure that we portray Black women as being loved too. And so I've been more intentional about making that in the work that I've been making recently. And not always the freedom fighter, because I have used the freedom fighter icon and motif before.
Oh, that was good. Now I gotta follow that. Yeah, it's beyond care. It is an attempt to undercut the logic that Black men are brutes. What was that? That's you, Amber. No worry, girl. That's all right. That's okay. But for me, it's deeper than that. Because it required me, once I framed it within that one particular framework, which is the Western European construct of femininity, which is it is women who make this work when it's not that all over the world, right? When I framed it within that particular construct, okay, I went down that line, and down that line, I found resources that I couldn't find in the hyper masculine space. I was doing a lecture last night for Savannah State, and I particularly talked to all students of color, and I said to the men in the room, I said, if you haven't read Audre Lorde, you better ask somebody. Because Lord will take you somewhere that Lord cannot. They said, what I say? God will take you somewhere, and that's great, but Audre takes you somewhere on this earth, right? And I thought to myself that had I not framed the work I was doing in a feminist construct of this is stereotypical women's work, I wouldn't have even found this other literature that has done something to me that broke me wide open, right? So for me, it is engaging that limited view from other folks, not you because you with me, that allowed me to find sources that would break me wide open. And trusting that those sources were going to feed me and nourish me the way I required, and they have in abundance, right? And the other thing I would say is my studio is in the Garment District, West 39th Street. You can't walk outside and not hit some fabric. You feel me? And that too has reframed my studio. So I have new works that I'm not showing anybody yet, except for my dealer. Which are woven tapestries stitched to chiffon, right? So it's like a Sigmar polka, so you can see through them, and on the other side are adhered images of Black men from porn magazines. And some of those images aren't from porn, but because they are an association, you think they are, right? So all these things and how the fabric takes me is, I guess that's my answer. I hope that helps. Oh, I appreciate you.
Are there any other questions? Anyone? Don't be shy. Do we have any questions? Oh, yeah, there's a question. Okay.
Hi, thank you again for the talk. This is specifically for Noel. I just blew my mind when you were talking about this kind of transition from tapestry through binary through to kind of digital as an amazing concept. And I just want to ask you, how maybe does the progress of technology and, the way the web is advancing and the way technology is advancing, does that reframe the way you look at textiles in a new way?
Yeah, it does. And I think this actually is married to something I forgot to say the last time, which we've talked about a lot. Is that it's very hard to experience a textile on screen, right? And that further aids the marginalization of textile as quote unquote craft, right? Which then also we notice affects prices, affects opportunities, right? Which is associated with women's work. Dig? So technology on that very fundamental level has reduced out the text, the textual, the feeling. I mean being literal, like the inner guts, what Lord calls the erotic. It reduces all that out until somebody comes into the show and they're like, oh, I didn't know. And you're like, yeah, fool, this ain't printed on fabric, it is the fabric. My image is the ground, your image is the ground. You know, I think, quite frankly, I was reading, I'm sorry, I'm going somewhere, but let the preacher preach. I was reading George Seurat's notebooks, because all that pointillism is textile. He was studying color theory in France with a whole slew of people we don't even know about at the Beaux-Arts, right? And in his notebooks, he says, for the history of painting, or for the history of art, when he's really talking about modernism, is like 1500s. Painting has reigned supreme. Before it, that's not the truth. Before it, textile was it. And he said, what I'm trying to do is submit painting to textile's rules, right? I'm trying to bring the thing that was actually central back to center, back home. I'm trying to make a homecoming, man. And unfortunately, technology is making it hard to do that, right? So for me, I am always conscious about the ways in which technology reduces out our own feelings, right? And it's the same thing you're talking about in terms of we are what, 80% in the world? But technology reduces all that to data, right? It's easy to turn off CNN when the shit gets too tough, you know what I mean? So I'm with you. And what's really brilliant about all this logic is that all of the stuff that people are tripping off of in terms of images and painting and screen culture came from textiles. We're the origin. She better recognize. Sorry, I had to go somewhere. I'm sorry.
Brilliant answer, no. Brilliant answer. Any other questions? Because these are fantastic questions.
I mean, I do, but if someone else has...
No, she doesn't.
Okay. I'm gonna take the mic.
Here we go.
So then my question is, where does art begin and craft end and vice versa? I still haven't figured that out for myself.
I'm sorry. There is no end. There is no split. It just is. It just is. There is. You're right. So the framework for that is value in terms of currency, right? Please go.
No, go ahead.
But for real, because for me, and this is why I like the answer that Beats drop was like beast mode with it, and she was so chill with it. I was like, girl, why you just drop the logic on me, right? I was like, okay, there is no real distinction in the sense that all I'm trying to do is open myself to the world and let whatever comes in, comes in. If I make the distinction or the precondition of my being in the studio is this and that is that, and I've already established that binary, then I've already, like technology, reduced out all the other sentient beings that will inform the complexity of my thoughts in the material way. You dig? Go ahead, child. Think about it, because we talked about it for real. Because remember, we were having this dope-ass conversation.
Because he wrote the
But we had...
essay for my daggone show.
Yeah, but we were having this conversation about the reason you and I are beating our heads against the wall like, yo, why isn't a New York gallery picking? I was, because my ego is pathetic. It's so sad. And I was like, why don't I have this, da-da-da-da-da-da? And I was like, but wait a minute. First of all, when you see the work on screen, they're like, this is just flat. Mm-hmm. So they don't understand physically what it's doing, right? And because it's textile, I'm just going to be real. Unless it's like a really identifiable object, like a quilt, it seems to be very hard for certain people to wrap their mind around what the hell this thing is actually doing in real time and real space.
Yeah, and then we're also looking at abstraction structure that is not, it was not formatted to have a conversation about textile. When you talk about fine arts in relationship to European art and how that lineage, imposed lineage, then transfers over to, you know, the U.S. fine art industry, you're looking at something that has been based on the perception of what is on canvas, painting on canvas. And it has always annoyed the hell out of me because canvas is a woven fabric. It is of fabric. And the only thing that then has an impact on that is the fact that you have a medium that is imposed onto the canvas, and then that transforms the relationship between the painting and the canvas itself. However, all of those things, once water hits them, it can be destroyed, period. And so I've always had a push and pull relationship with our perception of what is valuable when it comes to canvas painting versus something that is textile or even on paper, which is just another form of woven fabric. So to me, it's a way, it's an elitism that it's a system of how to, which is antiquated, of how to keep value in a certain hands. Period.
Bravo. Amen. Amen, Amber.
Hello. Bless the hold that microphone.
Woo. So if there are no more questions, are we done? We're done? Good. So I am so thankful that all of you are here tonight to share the 9th edition with us. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the supporters who have made Prizm happen for the past 9 years. The Green Family Foundation, the Knight Foundation, the Miami-Dade Department of Cultural Affairs, the Greater Miami Visitors and Convention Bureau, and the Florida Division of Cultural Affairs, and many of you who are here in the room. Prizm is literally a community effort. I cannot tell you how many of you have literally seen me in my craziness and have said, Mikhail, you're doing a fantastic job. We want to support you. And I appreciate each and every one of you so much. You all literally give me a reason to wake up every single morning and to continue supporting the work that you all are doing. So thank you all for being here. I want to ask that you enjoy the food, enjoy the drinks, and enjoy Miami Art Week. And
Say something real quick.
absolutely.
So I want to thank everybody, Stephen, Noel, Bisa, for agreeing.
Thank you.
Because this was absolutely part of a conversation that Mikhail and I were having. But I literally went up to folks and was like, "Can you do this? Will you participate?" And thank you everybody for saying yes. And Bisa, an additional thank you to you, because I know that you are dealing with some family stuff, and I appreciate that you are here. I hope that you're still on.
Thank you.
You're absolutely
Thank you
welcome.
for having me.
So,
Thank you. Yeah,
thank
thank
you,
you.
everybody. And everybody who showed up. Blessings. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Bisa. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Noel, for your insights, for sharing your time with us on a Tuesday, Basel Week, Miami Art Week day. Okay. Enjoy, everyone.